So, hello, welcome back to another episode of the Joel versus Arthritis podcast. We're here live at the time of recording this on the Chronic Pain Club on a Sunday night on my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Joel versus Arthritis. I'm delighted to be joined by Emma Townley, who describes herself as a mental health, chronic illness, and disability advocate, blogger, and content creator, and just all-round amazing person that I've been following on social media for about the last year or two, doing amazing things in the psoriatic disease, psoriasis sort of awareness space. And essentially, we're here to have a conversation because it's Psoriasis Awareness Month, not to be confused with World Psoriasis Day at the end of October. And basically, it seemed like a good opportunity to talk about psoriatic arthritis specifically because a lot of the coverage that tends to happen around PSA, as it's shortened to, focuses on like the rashes and everything. So tonight's conversation will be around the bigger picture of living with psoriatic disease. So before we get into that too much, Emma, welcome. I hope you're well.
Yeah, just about.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us because I understand that you're struggling a little bit from your COVID boosters. So do you want to tell us a little bit? You feeling well enough and everything?
Yeah, I had my fifth jab yesterday. I think you're on your fifth now as
Hmm.
well. Getting
Yeah, I am.
our badges in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a completely new one. So it was Moderna this time.
Exactly the same as
Um,
I had. Yeah.
yeah, so haven't had that one before. Figured I might be okay. Towards the end of yesterday, felt like I'd basically been hit by a bus. And I thought, "Meh, sure, I'll be fine." Oh, my days this morning. And I was so determined not to let you down. I was
Oh,
like,
bless you.
I will do this tonight. I don't care what happens. So I've basically, from when I last messaged you, I don't know, 9ish this
Yeah,
morning,
yeah.
maybe, I slept until 1, which seemed to help a bit, but I have a feeling I won't appreciate it tonight when I need to sleep.
Yeah.
And the heat hits me. And
Well, firstly, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much. Please don't feel like you have to. Like I say, if you do need to take a break, then we certainly can. And it's a very similar experience for me. So I'd had 4 Pfizers up until that point, and then I had the
oh, okay.
Moderna, and I had a really bad week, which I'm not going to talk about because I realise you're on day 1 and you don't need to hear how that
The
worked
horror
out for. Yeah,
stories.
you just don't.
Yeah.
So I suppose on that point, and yeah, thank you for your commitment. I'm sure everyone at home watching this is grateful as well. Um, and like I say, for anyone listening, guys, if we do change plans and everything, either on Twitch or the podcast, same reason I don't commit to an episode every single month, like religiously, because we're a chronic illness stream and podcast, and we have to cancel occasionally. And if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be setting very good examples for the people we're appealing to. So yeah, thank you, Emma. And like I say, if you do need a break, that's absolutely fine
Yeah.
at any point.
No, I do appreciate it this morning when you said, if you can't do it, yeah, don't. But no, I'm a very stubborn person at times. So I was like,
Yeah.
I will do it.
Us chronic illness folk tend to be. But I suppose whilst we're on the topic, I appreciate we haven't gone into anything sort of regarding your background, but is there anything you want to sort of give us a bit of an indication of how the pandemic impacted your long-term health condition?
Yeah. So it was one of those unfortunate timing things, really, because I was only diagnosed with PSA, psoriatic arthritis, towards the end of 2018. Um, so most of the start of 2019 was trying to work out the severity and how bad it might become and how I was dealing with it, and also myself just trying to get my head around it. Um, and then it was at this I think it was February 2020. That's when they decided to put me on methotrexate, and I thought, okay, we'll give it a go. We'll see what happens. Um, and then being told it's an immunosuppressant, so you have to be a lot more careful when it comes to picking up bugs and everything. And I thought, it'll be fine. And then a month later, we're in lockdown, and I'm suddenly getting these messages and letters through the post of, you're high risk, you have to shield, and you know basically if you get it, you're screwed. So I have health anxiety at the best of times, but from that point it just skyrocketed. And I was just kind of in this state of, do I carry on taking this medication, or because in my head at the time, and I think most people's head, because it was still March and we thought we were going to be in lockdown for 4 weeks, and I thought, oh, it will be short-lived, it'll be fine. Here we are, 2022, still trying to get our heads around it. So yeah, it was terrifying, really, really terrifying. And then the flip side of it as well was, of course, I thought, okay, I have to go and get regular blood tests, and I need to speak with the rheumatology department quite frequently. How am I going to do this when we can't go anywhere, we can't do anything? Fortunately for me, and it might be a risky thing to say, but this is just my experience. Actually, 2020 and all the endless lockdowns we had was actually one of the best years for myself,
Right.
because it gave me the time to slow down and focus on my health and regularly exercise, even though it was indoors. But I was cooking better, I was eating regularly, I was sleeping better, and everything just started to come together. I went sober, and my skin just started to heal. I started to feel better within myself. So although there was the anxiety and I was struggling a lot with my mental health, for me it was actually quite good.
Yeah.
I was quite fortunate in that respect, and I was really lucky that I still had regular contacts with the rheumatology department, and the GPs were really on it. They were like, we're aware you still need to have bloods, so we're still going to make it a priority to see you, even if we have to send someone to you. So yeah, I was really quite lucky.
That's amazing to hear, because obviously because of the nature of what we do here, we have to focus on the issues, and it tends to be a lot of sort of negative stories, because unfortunately we're here to sort of raise a flag to it. So yes, really nice to hear that was your experience, because I know lots of people, especially who were newly diagnosed or diagnosed in the pandemic, got a very different experience to what the norm is, and then that makes it really hard to advocate for yourself, because you don't know what to expect. So we've done lots of sort of awareness work right now, but it's really nice to hear in some pockets of the UK that
Yeah.
it's still working, which is great.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. It's a weird time to ask that, because you haven't formally gone through all your condition,
That's
but
fine.
whilst we were talking about COVID, I know everyone's really sick of hearing about it by now, but it feels like a question I have to ask when the opportunity presents. So I suppose, do you want to just tell it? You touched upon a little bit there about you were diagnosed in 2018. You said you didn't get it as that diagnosed in 2018. That implied you might have had psoriasis beforehand, or have I got that wrong?
Yeah.
No, yeah,
So sorry, carry on.
no, I was just saying, do you want to just sort of give us a bit of an overview of how it presented, and how that sort of path looked?
Yeah, so I was I was diagnosed with psoriasis in 2008. It was my first year at uni. I was living in halls, and I came up with this rash on my arm, and my brain, health anxiety, just automatically went, I have meningitis, I'm really ill, and this is awful. Sat there in my bathroom doing the glass test and everything. I was like, oh, it's not doing the usual thing, doing the glass test. Messaged my mum crying. She was like, you've had all your jabs, you don't have meningitis, it's probably just heat rash or something. Went to the doctors. First doctor I saw sat there scrolling on Google, every Google page they could find,
That's
and
reassuring.
just went, I don't know what it is. And I was like, great, that's wonderful, so what now? And I basically just got told to leave. Went to see my home GP. As soon as I walked in the door, he went, oh, you have psoriasis. And I was like, cool. And I didn't know what it was. I just went, okay, it's some skin thing, but okay. And it wasn't until it got so severe that I was head to toe. And I just went, this isn't good. This isn't a good thing. Went through, got referred to dermatology, same old thing of here's some cream, try that. So, all right. Wasn't working. Then started having UVB light therapy, worked wonders, absolutely amazing. But then within about a month of stopping it, just came back 10 times worse, absolutely awful. So I went through UVB 3 times, same thing happened every time. And I just kind of got to the point where I was like, this is just ridiculous. It's then when I started my blog and started looking at diet, lifestyle, do's and don'ts that you kind of find online. nothing's really helping. But I pushed through. I kept trying anything and everything I could. Um, but I noticed as it was going on, and when my flares, the skin flares were reducing, I had incredible pain, well, constantly, really, mostly in the places where I had the psoriasis the worst. So my knees and stuff and lower back. And I just thought, this is strange. I don't understand. Like, I'm not an overly active person, not as much as I used to be anyway. Um, and I just put it down to just, not having a decent enough lifestyle. And then I heard about psoriatic arthritis and thought, okay, that makes a bit more sense. When I started getting like the sausage fingers, my nails were pitted, and I was just getting all these other kind of signs and symptoms. And I went to my GP and I said, look, can you refer me to rheumatology? Might as well try, see, find out. And I went for an initial appointment, and they ran all the tests, even did a ultrasound on my wrist, which was really surreal, but yeah. Um, and they said, you're definitely on the cusp of having it, but it's not severe enough for us to give you an official diagnosis. And I was like, right, okay, so I clearly have it, but you're not going to treat me. They're like, basically.
It doesn't tick the boxes or fully, or
Which is, I know I'm all for, I love the NHS. I'd be probably dead without the NHS, but and I know that they have criteria they have to hit, otherwise they'll kind of be taking on everyone as a patient. But I've seen this happen a lot with people with chronic pain, especially like hidden illnesses, disabilities, people with mental health. It happens a lot with within like the eating disorder departments of, you're not sick enough, so we can't do anything. And it's heartbreaking. It happens so often. But yeah, so I went back the year after and I was like, look, I'm in a lot of pain. Something's not going on here. Something wrong's going on here. And they ran the tests again. They were like, yeah, you definitely have it. So we'll start treatment. And I said to them, I said, if you'd agreed to last year, do you think I would have reduced the amount of pain I have now and the damage that I've caused? And they said, yeah, probably. I was just like, okay, this is lovely. This is great. So, because as well, with getting older, it's not going to get any easier. It's
no.
Bodies are known for kind of deteriorating as you get older. So yeah, it's frustrating, but we're there now. So and they
Also,
have
like
been great.
the whole like the first step of trying some anti-inflammatories or whatever, there isn't really any like huge risk for that. Like not unless you're doing it real long term. Like I'd understand it if we're talking methotrexate and biologics and stuff, but like if you're sort of right on that cusp, would it have really hurt to just stick you on some low level anti-inflammatories? And because even if you could say, yeah, that improved a little bit, right? Okay, now we're in the ballpark, but. Yeah, it's frustrating because you are not the first person that we've talked to where the psoriasis is presented, and you're already halfway there at that point. And I think, like you kind of explained, there is a lot of people where PSA seems to be just oblivious or hidden, and I don't get why that I know you don't want to put ideas in patients' heads, but a bit like when I was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, and we have the big conversation about uveitis and what to look for, and if you get sting and pain in your eye, you need to go straight to A&E. That might never happen, but at least I know about it. I don't really see the harm in saying to a severe psoriasis patient, your knees or anything ever ache, or you start getting like asymmetrical blah blah, just give me a shout. And I'm hoping that's where patient initiated follow-ups are going to help massively, because you're already in the system, you're already under rheumatology or a specialist for the psoriatic element. So the fact that when that comes and you can put your hand up for a follow up, you can hopefully get through those doors a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I mean, well, because like you said about with the anti-inflammatories, I mean, because there was that year gap, and then I got the diagnosis. I didn't even get that, so we went straight from you're on the cusp to okay, it's really bad, let's put you on methotrexate.
Yeah,
it's just okay. So
you've missed that. and the thing is, that's I was in a conversation recently about sort of like it was a psoriasis project thing, and there was lots of talk there about that whole how scary something like methotrexate is for the first time patient.
Oh my, yeah,
And I was trying to explain to these clinicians that are on the call, it's like, there is a reason why people are avoiding that and they want to jump to biologics, because all they see is the horror stories. But even if they haven't seen the horror stories, I was on methotrexate from the age of 12 to 14 right through until my mid 20s, and I was still in my 20s throwing up a couple of times a week in the morning. Like, it felt like,
hmm,
I don't know what morning sickness is like other than what I've observed my other half, but it's that same that you wake up, you run to the toilet, and
yeah,
that's really off-putting. If that is your first experience of medicating psoriatic disease, it just
yeah,
makes no sense. So
yeah.
yeah.
It's wild. I mean, I like people at work now. They know I won't be in the office on a Friday because that's when I do my injections.
Yeah.
Um, and as soon as someone says on a Friday evening, "Do you want to do anything?" and my reply is always, "It's a Friday," and they're like, "Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay," because I know it's going to floor me. It
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
every time, and it's been years now. And I mean, when I first started taking it, I remember them saying, "Oh, you might feel dizzy, nauseous, all that spiel, like with most medications."
Yeah.
But like, I never knew how hard. There's photos of me I took. I think I did a social media post about it, where I'm sat by the toilet with my laptop doing work and just kind of smiling, like, because I'm just kind of like, this is my life right now.
Yeah.
Um, and they mentioned, oh, there might be some mild hair loss. Um, but no one really gets it. My hair started coming out in clumps, and I don't
Yeah.
know if it was linked to also kind of stress as well. But I got to a point where 2020, I just shaved it off. I was like, let's do it. Why not? But it really affected me really, really badly. And they never told me, because it's always that thing in the potential side effects of only a very few people get it. It's like, but can you prepare me in case I do get that? Because I might, you never know.
And the thing is, the first thing someone's going to do, like we've talked about already, is Google, and you see chemotherapy, and it terrifies people. And I think
Mhm.
the bit that really upsets me about, you wouldn't believe, Emma, how many times I've heard this experience, which is why I'm sort of quite passionate about it. Is like, there really is a place for methotrexate. It got me my first. I was in a wheelchair at 13. I started methotrexate at 14. And by the time I went to university, I was fit, able. I was able to play in the sports teams, and I had my first real big remission because of methotrexate. But I went into it, I guess, because I was a kid, and they, load you up with information, and they have to be consent and all this sort of thing. I was really informed, so I knew I couldn't drink, and I couldn't do this, and I couldn't do that. But
Yeah.
the amount of people I speak to who don't get any of that information, they're chucked on it when things are already really bad, like in your situation, and then the medical community wonders why there's not methotrexate uptake or resistance to that drug option, because
Yeah.
you don't give it an opportunity to succeed, and it is toxic. And
Mhm.
most people, like in my case, even when it does work, you will come to a point where it doesn't. And if you're not educated and ready for that, of course you're going to think my doctor poisoned me. But it's just that,
Yeah.
it's educating the patient. But yeah, I
Mhm.
appreciate anyone who's listened to this before has heard me bang on about that enough, so I'm not going to go any further. But I just want to touch upon, because you said about like how it affected you, and it seems like a good point to talk about that, because like, people know with psoriasis you've got the visible element. You've talked about like the hair loss, and people that get scalp psoriasis suffer with that sort of element as well. So how was that whole experience? Because I'm interested to know, you'd lived with psoriasis for a little bit. Did you feel like that sort of gave you thicker skin to deal with it? No pun intended,
I
but
was about to
or
say, quite literally.
yeah, or did you? I do that so often. I'm halfway through the sentence and I realise I'm doing it. Or did you find that was like another? Oh, it's another thing on my, on my shoulders that I've got to try and work with.
Yeah, it's for me, it helps to put a lot of things into place. When I was a kid, I had what I thought was chronic dandruff, and to an extent, it might have been. But I now look back and I think I'm pretty sure that was just scalp psoriasis, but we never knew. Um, in terms of the PSA, I used to be a dancer, and I was quite active, did loads of sports, and I got injured a lot, and it took me forever to recover. I can never really work out why. I damaged my knee before my final dance exam, and that's when I really stopped dancing, unfortunately. and my knees never really fully recovered, and I always had chronic pain in that knee. Same with my ankles. I used to sprain them all the time, and then I damaged my back when I was 16, really severely, and I have been diagnosed with a degenerative disc disease in my lower spine. But the further it's gone on, and the more I've been getting flares horrifically, year on year now. I mean, this year I was completely laid up, to a point where I was dragged to A&E screaming, hoping someone could try and fix me. Um, and it wasn't until I went to see my GP after that he said, actually, I think it's a disc disease, but I also think it is arthritis as well. You're getting more of an inflammation, and when your hips are flaring, it's, you know, the pain's going all around basically. And I was just kind of like, this is wild. Like, why has no one thought of this before? Considering, you know, 2008 diagnosed with psoriasis, and then 10 years later, when I've been talking about all this stuff to various healthcare professionals, but not once did anyone say, well, it could be psoriatic arthritis. It baffles me. And I think because I had flare-ups on my skin that was so severe for so long, and like you said, because it is more visible, especially as a young woman in her first years of uni, just wanting to, you know, be free, wild, have fun, it hit me hard. It really hit me. I felt like a monster. It was awful. And then add on the pain of it, and, you know, just the fatigue as well, the stuff that people don't talk about, like all the added stuff, the, you know, feeling like you have a fever constantly, but you're cold. Well, no, like, it's like if I sit in the sun, I feel cold, but I know I'm hot. And it's like the temperature fluctuations are just, so that's why I'm really struggling in this heat right now. It's just ridiculous. But I feel like because now I'm on the medication, luckily for now, and hopefully for a while, this is the clearest my skin has been since 2008. I mean, I've still got, you know, signs of psoriasis, but only in March this was bright red all the way down. I couldn't really move my arms. So for me, I'm like, this is pretty impressive. This is great. But now I'm noticing the pain internally a lot more, because I think I was so aware of how painful my skin was that it took away from everything that was happening inside. So now I'm more aware of that. And yeah, when it does get to days where I can barely walk or just lift something up, I'm just suddenly like, okay, so I'm on all this medication. How much more do I have to do? Like, how is this going to get worse? How much more I'm going to have to do to
The not knowing, isn't it? It's like you can't
Yeah.
plan for anything. And I'm interested to ask you, like, how did you find out? Because you've done it the other way around. In that, I often talk about when I got psoriasis in my mid-20s. Like, I had rashes through my teenage years. I just didn't make a big enough thing about it, and they were in embarrassing places for a teenage boy. And I almost felt a bit of relief in my mid-20s when I suddenly was covered in rashes, because it was like, look, this is my autoimmune process live in action, and you can now all see it for all the years that I've had to prove my pain to people, because I don't traditionally swell. I know other people do. If I'm going to swell anywhere, it's like my fingers and toes, typical psoriatic disease. So how was that for you, that going from having a very visible long-term health condition to then the psoriatic arthritis bit, which is in the joints and not always so visible?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this earlier, and I think I did a post about it the other day, where I'm at this point where I do feel really conflicted, and part of me feels like I've lost a part of my identity, because I've spent so long talking about, blogging about psoriasis, and now that I'm kind of near enough clear, part of me feels like a fraud. So if, like, especially this month where I'm trying to raise more awareness, but I'm like, but I can't really show anything because my my skin's not in a really bad way. And then I feel kind of guilty. I see all these people kind of posting about their skin, and I'm just like, I have been that person before. I'm not right now. And then so with the psoriatic arthritis, So I've got a blue badge for my car. I've got a disability card. I've got my like methotrexate card that I have to carry around with me. I've got my sunflower lanyard, all of which tend to just sit in my bag. They're kind of like my emergency.
Yeah.
If I need them, they're there. Some weeks I'll need to use walking sticks. Some weeks I'll need to use crutches, depends on the severity. But I feel like they're the only times people take me seriously is if I visibly have a walking aid with me. And even then, people won't take me seriously because they think that old line of "you're too young to have anything wrong with." Or is it part of a costume? Because I buy Neo walk sticks and they're really fancy, and like they do look like they could be part of a costume. It's not until I use crutches where people then take me seriously because they think, "well, that's a medical device, therefore something must be wrong." And because it's crutches, it's like, oh, maybe they've sprained their ankle or they've just had an operation. And that blows my mind because I have days where I tend to use the accessible or disabled toilets because my back can go like whenever it feels like it. So knowing that I can hoist myself up or I can press a button, because I have been stuck in a toilet before and it's terrifying, knowing I've got that around me makes me feel safer. But the amount of times people see me walk in, they just kind of look at me like, you're one of those just using a toilet you're not meant to use. And I'm just like, nah. But if I walk in using a stick, they're like, oh, okay, that's fine.
I had the weirdest experience where it wasn't until I became a dad that I felt comfortable using some of those facilities, because I don't know, it's almost like, well, if anyone asks, I've got a kid and I'm going, because normally the baby changing room was the same as the disabled toilet. And it's stupid. I shouldn't have had to be that in a position. And I think we need to try and like normalise that in the advocacy space. Like we all know that there's an issue with that feeling like a fraud, and it's something we talked about literally on the last episode of the Joel vs Arthritis podcast with Amy, and it is like that. You feel like a fraud because it comes and goes, and you can have all of these things like your badges and your visible sort of mobility aids, and then in 2 weeks' time it can all settle down. You don't need any of them. But it really shocked me getting into the sort of advocacy space, how much that exists there, and that almost like gatekeeping and badges of honour. And so the amount of times I've been asked, well, you do all this stuff for psoriasis, but I can't see any psoriasis. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like drop my trousers in the middle of a conference hall? Or you haven't seen my feet, which are like the worst part. And it's always traditionally been my feet. But I've had times where I've had scalp psoriasis. I've had times where it's been obvious on my arms. And I've never had the whole sort of plaques on my elbows. I was like horrified because I thought that would, out of all the places, that would be the safe space. And I think we need to try and normalise that it doesn't matter how much you talk up and speak up and raise awareness and stuff. You can have good spells and remission too, and you are still allowed to talk about the issues during those times.
I mean, there's so much ableism that goes on within these communities. It's wild. It blows my mind. I mean, I think it's why I detached myself a lot from the kind of like the mental health community, because there were spaces within that where it's becoming almost competitive. And I just thought, okay, there's definitely one subject where it shouldn't be a competition of how unwell you are or not. But it's kind of, I mean, I still get that guilt feeling where I will do a post with one of my walking sticks, and then I think I'll see a ton of other people who maybe, they're amputees or something, and I'm suddenly like, oh, can I do this? And then I thought, yeah, because that's what a walking aid is there for, to aid you if you need it. That's what most aids are there for, if you need them. But it's kind of, it's one of those things where, okay, for example, someone who has cancer, if they've gone into like remission, you're not going to say, oh, well, you've not been through that, like you can't talk about your experience. Yes, they can, because they have been through it. They've got every right to. They could potentially still be going through it, and God forbid, it could potentially come back. So yeah, there's a massive problem with it. It's kind of interesting to see in a weird psychological way, but it's also extremely damaging. It's terrible.
And like I had someone ask me once, like, would you still, like, if you got a cure tomorrow, would you still do it? So I was, yeah, because that's not the reason. I'm not doing it for my own gain. Like, if anything, me making all this noise about it probably negatively impacts my care, because if I'm a doctor and I'm seeing Joel plastered all over social media, he's probably going to the bottom of my queue, like, because like, just out of spite, if you're just going to give me a hard time, then I'm going to give you, and
Yeah.
I'm joking, but it's like, that isn't the reason we do it. So it seems like a really obvious segue to talk into about why you started doing that, because it's a big leap, isn't it, from dealing with this massive life change and long-term condition to then finding the energy to try and raise awareness of it. So was there like a spark moment for that, or did it just sort of organically happen?
Yeah, like I said, I'd always try to use my social platforms to speak about mental health. It was, well, still is really to a certain extent, but it was something that, dominated my life, what mental illness did anyway, for a very, very long time. Um, and I think we both are similarly of the era where social media was really starting to take off. And it's incredible to see where we've come from. I was only speaking to someone about it the other day, how I'm still partly terrified of social media, but when I think back in the day, how it was people just tearing into one another, it was quite a scary place to be. But I used to use LiveJournal um, to blog all my thoughts and feelings. Um, and then kind of, I wanted somewhere where I could talk more openly about mental health. And for ages, I wanted to write a blog, but I didn't want to just write one for the sake of writing one. So it was when I got my psoriasis, well, it was 4 years, I think, after I got my psoriasis diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
that I thought, okay, I'm just going to use it as a place where I'm kind of documenting my meals and stuff and how I plan to try and look after myself. And then it just kind of, I saw more online. I kind of started talking to more people, and it became really getting invested in what psoriasis really is, and learning about it, and being more of a voice for people that potentially have just been diagnosed and don't know about it. And that intertwined again a lot with mental health, and started then trying to do more, be more involved in campaigns, organizations, done a fair amount with Psoriasis UK, and everything. And then, yeah, when I got the PSA diagnosis and like the treatment started amping up and everything, I was just like, okay, I'm trying to get my head around this. And I know people online are talking about it a lot. So I'm going to try and do as much as I can, but kind of like you said, finding the energy. Well, I mean, for my job, I'm a content creator and work in social media anyway. So every day I'm it's just content and social media, and it takes its toll. It really, really does. So I struggle a lot more these days to find the energy to do it. So I try and really focus on key dates or events that I know are coming up, instead of just posting for the sake of posting, which is what I used to do heavily, and it just, yeah, became draining. And
I think we
um
all find that. We all say so enthusiastically. I know I definitely did. And you tried to spread yourself so thin and answer every message, and yeah, the amount of times now I'll get sort of chased in my DMs, and I have to sort of like politely say, like, I'm not a medical professional anyway. But for every sort of minute I'm spending answering thousands of messages, it's less I'm achieving to sort of help change, and sort of have to signpost people to those organisations like the Psoriasis Association where they can get that support. Because yeah, for me, I'm focused on that whole raise awareness to enact change. I can't be a support guy because I provide support groups and things, but I can't be a support guy because I've got no. I can only talk my experience. I can't talk about
mhm.
everyone's. But I interested that you sort of you mentioned it there, but also I know from sort of following online, you talk a lot about mental health, and there isn't many of us that are linking the two and doing both. This might be a personal question, so feel free to dodge it. But like, was the mental health sort of awareness raising separate, or do you still see that very much as sort of entwined with the physical element, I suppose, of psoriasis?
So it kind of all kicked off with the mental health side, because I struggled with my mental health from a very young age, and back in the day, it wasn't really spoken about. We didn't have all these platforms to find information. Not always a good thing. There's a lot of very bad stuff online, but I didn't have all of that. And so as I got older and I learned more, and I was more involved with it through work and everything, and I became a very, very open book. I just thought, I wish I had this when I was younger, because it would have helped with so many things. Um, and like I said, it kind of dipped a bit because there were points where I was really unwell and I was taking on a lot of other people's pains and problems, and actually making myself more unwell. And then again, there was stuff within the community that was a bit like, "Ugh, why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening." And then frustrations as well, cuts to funding, people just not getting the support that they need to get. So it all became quite a lot, because I also did my dissertation for my master's on young people's mental health, and I spent months doing research, and by the end of it I ended up giving myself shingles because I got that stressed
Yeah.
and unwell from it. So it took its toll, but I now look at it as, yeah, I know when it's two-sided, I guess, because I know that if I'm feeling unwell mentally, it can really take its toll on my psoriasis and everything that's happening internally. It can cause flare-ups, especially a lot of stress. Um, but at the same time, it's just that vicious cycle, isn't it? The more unwell I do feel with psoriasis and PSA, the more mentally unwell I can become. So it's trying to find that balance. For me, because from a young age, I struggled horrifically with body issues for many years. It's not until past few years that I've finally kind of got to a place where I'm okay in my own skin. And I'm 34, so that's a very long time. And that's where I kind of link it a lot more to the mental health now, the body confidence, the kind of speaking to yourself in a positive way, and understanding that, society plays a huge part in this. There's still a lot of stuff within society of the norms, how we should look, how we should feel, and it's breaking those, rules and restrictions and stereotypes that just never should have been there. And hopefully helping people with that side of things, because I'm also, I do speak about it in a way of that, I can put a post out being like, hey, look at me, I'm wearing short shorts and I feel great, but also reminding people that, like, but it took me a long time to get to this place. It's not something that just happens, and even if you don't feel comfortable doing it, you don't have to do it. But I suggest trying to just change your mentality around how people perceive you, how you perceive yourself, and how society has made up all these horrible rules on how we should look and
And it's
everything.
hard enough as it is with psoriasis, because you're still here, even though it's 2022, you're still hearing people saying that people request desk moves at work because they think they can catch it and all that nonsense, like, and
Yeah,
swimming pool experience, like, and how that's still a thing, and the whole body. Like, I'm lucky in that the body image bit has never really affected me, and I think that's because unless I get it on my head and having
mhm,
no hair, it's fairly obvious.
yeah,
Even when I had it, I was aware of it, but I didn't feel like it got me down. But every
yeah,
psoriatic disease flare, my mental health dipped, and sometimes it would dip before. And you
mhm,
mentioned stress. I'm yet to meet anyone with psoriatic arthritis where stress isn't a trigger, and it is that cycle is the perfect way of describing it, because you get stressed, you get rashes, you get stressed about the rashes, you get stressed more, and it just,
yeah,
and then eventually you end up with depression. And we are now getting to that place where they're starting to be looked at together, especially with anyone who's experienced pain management clinics and things like that, where they sort of that multidisciplinary approach. But when you go see, my view is when you go see a dermatologist, there should be in the same corridor, like you'd have a biologics nurse with rheumatology, there should be some sort of mental health link there as well, so they can
yeah,
bring them in, because surely they're getting very high numbers, I would have thought, in a working day of people that mention
yeah.
their mental health.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said earlier as well, even health anxiety, because if you then start, like the whole thing with COVID and being on medication and how it can increase your risks and everything, but also because of all the other potential risks that can come with having the diagnosis, the things that they also don't really talk about enough, which I think they should, but like heart problems
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just all the other stuff that could potentially happen. which it shouldn't be a case of them, terrifying you with it, but just talking about it more. So, because I used to drink heavily and I'm a smoker, and I know I've cut out the drink, but I know for a fact I definitely still shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't smoke anyway, but um, the amount of nurses that have just been like, no, I'm like, but I know that I really shouldn't be, and you should probably be promoting it a bit more that I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of those people that actually kind of sometimes needs the fear put into me, because otherwise I will just carry on.
Yeah.
I'll be like, yeah, it's all fine. But yeah, and I think another side with the mental health is that I went through a really big trauma in 2011, and before that, I was actually getting to a place where my skin and my mental health were quite good, and it wasn't until that the trauma that everything just flared again massively. And that's, if anything, kind of, if I have kind of any flashbacks or anything, I notice that my body reacts straight away. And yeah, there's a lot to be said. I mean, your mind does a lot of stuff. It kind of keeps your body going. So it's obvious that if something's unhappy up here, it's gonna fire off things everywhere else. So
my wife notices I will, if I'm stressed, she'll see me itching, and there is no rash there, and I'm itching because somewhere my brain is making that link to, you get stressed, so a couple of days later you got rashes and you itch, and then because you damage the skin, you inevitably trigger a flare in that location, and and it is, you don't know you're doing it, but psychologically there's such a massive link. So, and what you're talking about there, again, it comes back to that personalized education for the individual. And there will be some, we've all got those people in our lives, and sometimes painfully it tends to be people that are quite close to us that don't want to engage with the mental health conversation. Or I've been in a wheelchair as a kid, yet I still have areas of my support network, shall we say, where them conversations where I suddenly get back to losing mobility, it's difficult again. And I get it comes from a good place and people want you to be well, and it hurts them to see you losing your mobility, but they don't want to have those conversations. And I think, it comes back to that personalised, like we're talking about with the methotrexate thing. If people want to know, let's provide that and give them a platform and educate and have an outlet. But if they don't want to engage it, then that's fine, and you can carry on doing exactly what dermatologists and everyone are doing anyway. But to have that, okay, let me just bring in the therapist or whatever. Just for me, for anyone who's waving a red flag, and because everyone's different, that benchmark can change. I'd like to think that my doctor would, because I'm quite open, maybe it isn't a red flag when I say I've been really struggling with this and my sleep's been bad. But if I come in another day and I'm really quiet, or whatever might be different for me, it would be nice if them levels were there, wouldn't it, for personalised care?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know I've got a friend who he's a PWP, so he works in mental health, and he's actually starting to do training which focuses on mental health support for people with chronic illness. And it's fantastic to see it's being rolled out in a few places, and it definitely should be a thing. Going back to the whole starting medication just before lockdown, I live on my own, so there were many times where I was genuinely terrified because I was like, who do I talk to? I can't just ring up. I mean, I've got a number direct for rheumatology, but they don't want to hear about what's going on up here. They just want to know how my joints are doing, or how
That's
the
hard enough
medication's going.
getting them to listen to the skin element of
Well,
psoriatic disease, let alone the
yeah, exactly. So yeah, having that balance is hugely important, which is why it is great to have these support groups. It shouldn't be the case where patients are starting them themselves and being the forefront of it, but it makes a huge difference. I've met some amazing people over the past 2 years just through Instagram, all ranges of disability or chronic illness. So that's been a lifeline, really. But like I said, that shouldn't be the case.
No, it shouldn't. And you saw such a boom of that during the lockdown and everything, didn't you? Like, it was, I went from basically talking to myself to suddenly having an audience, mainly because when people took up bacon and so on and things like that, a load of people took to Instagram to have chronic illness. And there was good and bad sides to that, especially if people from day one were calling themselves advocates and maybe didn't have the basis to give that advice. But and unfortunately, I don't know about you, but I've definitely seen that all drop off. And I had like a real withdrawal thing go on earlier this year, where I was like, oh, okay, my post used to get hundreds of likes now, and it wasn't the likes bit that bothered me. It was the people I used to talk to every day as a support
Mm.
network, people I could name, and I could name their kids, even though I'd never met them because I knew so much about them. And now they're gone, and the accounts are just
Mm.
closed, and I don't know. I really struggled with it. I don't know about you, or maybe it's just something I noticed.
No, no, definitely. I think it was a really, I think, harsh transition because, everyone spoke highly about the new normal, um, and how magical everything was because everything is slowed down. And yeah, people were becoming a community all over the world and, sharing this kind of same pain. And then it was kind of made out that it would slowly go back to being how things were, but it didn't. It just became fast paced, non-stop burnout lifestyle. I noticed it. I mean, I think that's why I got extremely ill um the start of this year, because I went from occasionally going in the office, but it's still being kind of relaxed and slow, to basically near enough doing 5 times a day in the office again. And it just being like bam, bam, like just non-stop. And my body just went, no, what are you doing? And it really hit, and I struggle with it now. I don't know how we used to do it. um I don't know why we're still pushing to do it now. But yeah, and I feel the same. I don't see as many people online that I was during those times, and I guess I'm kind of the same, where I don't like it because of all of that. I don't have the energy and the time to post as much as I want to, and engage with people as
For
much as
me,
I
for
want to.
me, it feels like a part of the conversation is just not being had enough. Like we know that treatment's delayed, and we know that the waiting lists at hospitals and stuff like that. But people, when for some people, they knew was that online support element, and then when it just
Mm,
suddenly shriveled back to pre-pandemic, and we could see it as a positive, and we reached lots of people, and we had lots of awesome conversations. I mean, lots. Literally, at one point in lockdown, it was all I did. That was my social life. Was talking to people on social media all day, and a bit like we do here on Twitch and everything, that creating that space where those come together, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and that really affected me. And you say about your body like going back to normal. I'm still not there. My attendance now in the day job is so much worse than in 2020 when I was stuck in bed in pain,
mm.
because back then I had people I could talk to about it, and now all of a sudden everyone's got back to normal, and some of us are still sitting here like, oh, okay. Like,
Yeah,
and I haven't
yeah.
adjusted at all. I really haven't, and I think that's why I do so much of this stuff, because it's that filling the time, not having the empty head space to go
Mm.
downhill with mental health. So it's reassuring that I'm not the only one that's experienced.
Yeah, no, and I do. I'm really lucky, to be fair, with work. They're extremely flexible, and I do have the option to work from home. But I think that's what I struggle with. Meant I either have to work from home and be in that headspace, or I need to be in the office. Like I find it really hard now to do either or. Because I mean, especially it's one of those things where if I get myself into a mentality on a Monday of like, okay, I'm going into the office, although it's probably draining me more than I need it to, I can just do that. I can be like, right, this is what I'm doing. If I then have a day at home, I'm like, well, I just want to sleep now. And my body, like in my head, I'll know I have to do stuff, but I'm like, but I could just stay in bed and do nothing. So yeah, I really struggle with that. I have to, yeah, be in the right mind frame to know where I am, what I need to do. I can't just flip between the two of them. So it's tricky.
And there's a big planning element with our disease, and there's so much
Yeah.
unknown. So it's really hard if that is that fluid the situation to know if you're coming and going and have the things in place you need to succeed in a career and everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, because people always they hate how much of a planner I am. They're like, oh, just go with the flow, have fun. I'm like, I would love to, but if I go somewhere and someone suddenly says, oh, we're walking 10,000 steps to this destination, no, I need to know that I'm doing that so
Yeah,
then I can have 3 days of doing nothing. Because
yeah, yeah.
otherwise, yeah, you have to, yeah. And even then, when you do plan, it's still, things like this where I was kind of like, well, I've planned for it, but now I feel
You
terrible
still got
that
a
I'm
spanner in
gonna
the works, yeah, even no matter how
yeah,
much you plan for it.
exactly.
And with that, I'm really conscious that you're not 100% today, and we've kind of come back nicely full circle on the mental health COVID impact. So I suppose just so I don't keep you too much longer, and I'm not going to sleep tonight if I know you suffered for the sake of this interview.
No, I'm actually doing all right. So
Good.
we're good.
So I suppose the last sort of one or two things I just wanted to ask you is, I suppose we've talked a lot about the unseen side of PSA and the sort of branches of it and everything. I suppose, firstly, what is the one thing you wish people, or it doesn't necessarily have to be one thing, but what is the thing you wish people knew more about psoriatic arthritis? Yeah, answer that first, and then I'll give you the opportunity to tell people where they can find you as well.
Um, well, I think yeah, the key thing is knowing it exists. Really, it only it took me having to kind of research it to know it exists. So I think, like we touched on earlier, when you are diagnosed with psoriasis, or even sometimes it is the other way around, but knowing that it could potentially be a thing. But also, what I found the most is from trying to be more involved with arthritis campaigns and everything. PSA is rarely spoken about. I mean, it's there, it's hovering about, but when I think of arthritis, my go-to is rheumatoid because it's spoken about a lot. Um, and the amount of times I've said to people I have psoriatic arthritis or PSA, and they're like, "Oh, so you just have arthritis?" I'm like, well, no, it's
Yeah.
kind of different. They're like, "Oh no, but it's just arthritis." I'm like, no, but that's the thing. It's not. I probably wouldn't have this if I didn't have psoriasis. So it's one of those things that I think needs to be spoken about more. There's just a ton of education around it, really, and I know a lot of us are trying to get it out there, mostly on social media and stuff, but just even those ongoing things of you're too young to have that. I know, like yourself, for example, you are someone who is diagnosed with so is it I always get it wrong.
Yeah, no, it's JIA, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Um
and then
but
they
again,
make it even
I
more
only
confusing because there's a subtype in front of that, which we won't bother going all into.
but I mean, I only found out about that because I started doing more research myself about psoriatic arthritis, and
Yeah.
then it took me on a kind of path of finding out about other types of arthritis. So, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to know about every diagnosis in the world, um,
No, but it'd be
but
nice if I didn't get a message every single day asking me about my RA because I've run out of ways to politely answer that, and it is literally every single day.
yeah, and I think because knowing that, I think you can also have kind of more than one type of arthritis as
Yeah, yeah,
well. So yeah, it's the same with most things that I tend to talk about on the internet. Just so much more education, especially coming from professionals downwards. It shouldn't be a case of people having to Google stuff themselves, especially because there's so much trash online. You don't know what is real or right. And I mean, I touched on this the other day, but better conversations with people who are able to carry children. Actually, no, not just that, because you brought something up as well. Anyone who can be involved in any form of reproduction, better conversations around that and medication. That I want to see happen a lot more, because
yeah.
that prevented me from having treatment for a good 2.5 years.
It shouldn't be an
So
assumption based on the age bracket you're in. It should be your doctor should know what. It kind of goes back to that whole "what's your acceptable outcome," which I bang on about way too much on this show. But it is that if you know the individual, then you've kind of got the answers to those questions. It shouldn't be, "Oh, you
yeah.
fall between this age bracket, therefore we're not going to offer you this because we assume you're going to want to bear a child or whatever." And yeah,
Yeah, and even if you said it like, and it can be traumatic as well. I mean, because one of my experiences was saying, I've been diagnosed with PCOS and potentially I might not even be able to. So, but I don't want to be having this conversation with you. I want us to be sorting out my treatment. We
my
shouldn't be talking
priority
about,
is X, Y, and Z.
yeah, exactly. And if I am telling you I'm not planning on having children, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
So yeah, that is definitely a big thing for me. and probably many more people.
Yeah, it's a really valid point. And yeah, as you mentioned, that can happen to men too. As like for anyone that doesn't know if you've been on this show before, you'll know this. But sulfasalazine essentially delayed me and my partner having children for 2.5 years because nobody assumed. Like I now know it's a really well known thing. Well, it wasn't for me that it can lower sperm count and everything, but everybody was giving me the green flag to start a family. And we didn't know why that wasn't happening, only to find out that when I was given a break from sulfasalazine because of my liver numbers on my blood tests, we conceived instantly. And so it's like 2.5 years of our life lost to that, and nobody brought it back to my treatment because a lot of the times when looking at those issues with treatment, it's very much focused on the woman or the person carrying the baby, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, you say loads, it's common knowledge, but I'm on it and I never knew that until you brought it up the other day. I was blown away. I was like,
yeah, I feel really stupid though because you read the paperwork, it's really there, like really front and center now. But I promise you, as somebody that's been on it since 12 years old, non-stop, nobody's obviously having that conversation with me. And then the issue is nobody thought to have that conversation with me when I started going to appointments on my own. So when I went to uni, that might have been a really good time to talk to me about these things. So yeah, and that's where men can fall through the gap too, as much as, like I say, your experience, unfortunately, where women find they can't have access to treatment because of that period of their life, and that might not even be a priority. So yeah, that seems like a really strong message to end on. Thank you so much for your time, Emma. Where can people find you if they want to check you out on social media or other places?
So I'm mostly active on Instagram, which is at Red Silver Mountains. That's my kind of go-to. It became my blog really from when I had my blog. I'm occasionally on Twitter, which is at Red N Silver, so just an N in the middle. But yeah, I think Instagram would be my go-to. It's where I tend to put all my ramblings and whatnot. So.
And for anyone who's listening this back on a podcast or watching it back on YouTube, I'll put all that in the show notes, so you can just click a link and find Emma nice and easily. I will say goodbye to you now because if I don't and we carry on, it sounds really odd for the people listening at home months later on the podcast. But if you do want to stick around or you want to join us again on Twitch, then please do. And if you want to field any questions, then I can read a few bits out. So guys, if you're watching this live and you'd like to pose a few questions to Emma, then now's your cue to put it in chat. But yeah, on behalf of everyone on the community and anyone listening to this back, Emma, that was brilliant. So thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I actually had a really good time. I was less nervous than I thought I'd be.
Thank you.